Alrighty, good to see everybody this morning. Nice, bright, early. I think this is the first day of VREC, right? Or was it yesterday? I don't know. But anyway, it's nice to see a lot of smiling faces for once, you know. It's kind of hard to even think about 1 year ago and where we were at. I think silver was, what, $27, $28? Who would have guessed? Even gold. I mean, gold was, I think, sub 3,000 around this time last year. And here we are, over 5,000. It's a profound shift. Will it last? Nobody knows. I think everybody in this room has probably a different view on what's coming. We don't know. But it does mean that there's much more excitement around mining, investing in mining stocks. I guess the term I use is that it's both exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. I look at things like how we're going to actually gear up exploration, because we really are understaffed in terms of mining professionals. I guess money solves a lot of problems, but we'll see. It's time to get our skates on. And I think one of the biggest investors in this space, as most people know, is Rick Rule. Has been a key part of the entire mining community and investment community for many, many years now. It's been a fellow I admire tremendously. I remember Rick investing in some of my companies way back in the day. And I'm sure everybody in this room knows Rick, but it is a delight to have Rick's attention and ability to talk here as a keynote. So, welcome.
Well, first of all, thanks, Quinton. I've been the beneficiary of your insights around exploration for a long time. Although I've been an investor in the mining community, my background was as a bouncer and a loan shark, and occasionally I needed some of my misconceptions set straight, so thank you for saving me from my own worst instincts from time to time. I'd like to thank our hosts, or frankly, more accurately, our hostesses for this. And I'd like to note that one of the things that's probably amused me and infuriated them for the 60 years I've been in the mining racket is the fact that mostly in the mining business, when I looked at the managers or investors, I looked at myself in the mirror. Old, fat, bald guys. I'm not a likely proponent of ESG, but I do know arithmetically that if women are 50% of the population and 50%, or they would argue 55% of the collective IQ, that we should be employing all of the IQ in humankind to solve the problems. And I would suggest, too, rather humbly, that my generation, if you look back at what we've accomplished in mining over 50 years, have probably left some room for improvement. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for your efforts on our behalf. I note further that this is sort of Yukon focused, which is wonderful. My own belief, and I don't say this with too much experience, just rather with an understanding of arithmetic and an understanding of infrastructure, that the Yukon's time, I think, is fairly coming, finally coming, to the extent that you all can hook the grid up there as an example and bring power. That's going to help. But what's really going to help, I think, is that you're going to have the benefit of 50 or 60 years of exploration done by your predecessors to leverage off of. Everybody, particularly in the conference hall, likes to believe that a discovery can be made over a long weekend and that you can get gratification in the stocks that you hold. In my experience, discovery is a 5-year process, a 10-year process, a 15-year process. I look at the work that, as an example, Archer Cathro has done in the Yukon for 65 years, and the database is getting fat enough that 3 ladies are on the verge, I think, of some success. And by extension, the Yukon is onto the success. Having done that long-winded introduction, I'll give you some remarks about the market. The first, and my apologies for many reasons for those who heard my talk yesterday, but this will go to some parts of that. This is, as many of you know, an extremely, extremely cyclical business. Extremely cyclical business. And I don't need to remind you that for most of you, at least the issuers in the crowd, things are more pleasant now than they were 3 years ago. The older people in the crowd will understand that this too, sadly, will pass. And when the theme of the breakfast is seize the day, really truly seize the day here in a very rarefied circumstance, a circumstance that won't last. So you need to do what you're going to do, and you need to do it very quickly. I'm reminded in 1984 of traveling to Midland, Texas. Midland had done extraordinarily well in the decade of the 70s, the oil boom. It went from sort of a 3-cow town to 80,000 people. And when the oil boom busted, Midland fell in really tough times. And I remember seeing a bumper sticker on a truck that stuck with me ever since, because, by the way, my fortunes early on mirrored those of Midland. And a bumper sticker said, "God, please give me one more bull market. I promise not to waste it." We're in that bull market. Seize the day means don't waste it. Now, my own technique has been as a pawnbroker, always. I've been an aggressive check writer in bad times. I've been an aggressive check casher in good times. Yes, I'm cashing checks now. I am redeploying, but I'm cashing checks. My own mantra has always been to buy hate and sell love. 3 years ago, walking through a conference here, there were a lot of checks to write. Right now, there's a few checks to cash, which is a wonderful circumstance. You have to do that. Hopefully, you'll still have me around to write checks to you when the market turns bad again, although at age 73, there are some problems now. How many people are issuers in the room, or close to issuers, related to issuers? Quinton, raise your hand, for Christ's sakes. He says, I'm a consultant, right? I'm a consultant. Some of you know that early in my career, I was a bar owner here in Vancouver. And one of the things that we did to get people into bars early is we passed out real nice hors d'oeuvres to get the room full, before other people's rooms were full. So when people were running around looking for where the noise was our bar. And when those plates of hors d'oeuvres were empty, when there was no more shrimp or meatballs or anything like that, they were empty. The point of this is, if you're an issuer, the time to take hors d'oeuvres is when they're passing them out, right? After they're done, they're done. You are in a period right now that is likely as easy as it ever will be to take money. Don't take money if you're not going to need it, but I've never seen a circumstance in my life, ever, where y'all didn't need it. So you have a financing window. The financing window may get better, but why would you bet the company on the word may? The time to take hors d'oeuvres is when they are passing them out. For those of you in the room who are check writers, which is to say investors, I said, well, raise your hand if your side of the business is that you either raise money or write checks. So most of you are here for free breakfast. You're not cashing checks, you're not issuing checks, you just want Tara and the ladies to feed you eggs. So, okay. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about writing checks, too. I've done a lot of that in my life. I want to talk to you about what goes into writing a check, what you want to do. The first thing is when you wander through the exhibit hall over there, all these people are talking to you. Well, some of the really dumb ones are trying to tell you where the gold price is going to go. There actually still are some issuers that are stupid enough to think I care what they think about macro. That's useful too, by the way. I just walk by the booth. I don't have to stop. But what really the early stage is about is all people. It truly is all people. If I've learned nothing else, it's that the early stage of the business isn't a physical property business. I learned at UBC about the same time that these rock packages were formed that about 1 in 3,000 mineralized anomalies becomes a mine. So the upset value proposition on Howe Street is that you're taking a 1 in 3,000 chance at a 10-to-1 return. Something that makes the BC lottery look like a really good deal. What matters is the people on top of the rocks. That's what really matters, the people on top of the rocks. And I've learned, too, that backing a successful person isn't enough. I made that mistake for a long time, probably 10 years. My rationale was success. And I learned after 10 years that the success has to go deep. Specifically, the success should relate to the task at hand. It took me till I was about 35 to figure out that if somebody said to me that they had been successful, and that success was that they operated a producing gold mine in Archean terrain in French-speaking Quebec, and that the task at hand was exploring rather than producing for copper gold porphyries or epithermal gold in accreted terrain in Spanish-speaking Peru, that while the person had been a success, they weren't necessarily a success at the task at hand. And that success and that experience has to go below whoever the chief ego is, whoever the CEO is, whoever the largest shareholder is. Who is your chairman? What does your chairman bring to the party? Is that chairman there to protect your job and your salary? Or does the chairman bring something to the task at hand? You need to raise some money. Has your CFO raised money before? You need to build a mine. Has your CFO had treasury experience building a mine? Your VPX, if you have a VPX, is your VPX experienced with the rock packages that he or she is looking at today? Really, the determinant of success in the exploration stage, and one could argue in the development stage, comes from human resources as opposed to physical resources. My friend Bob Bishop once said to me, trying to disabuse me of this belief, that the rocks don't care who own them. That's true, but I care. And what I've learned is that there are some bad people who can screw up good rocks, and there are some good people who can take a bad rock package, lose it, and get a good rock package. So I would suggest to you that it's very important to understand the task at hand. Now, people will throw back at me, Rick, you've backed Ross Beatty since Christ was a choir boy. He can't possibly have deep knowledge about everything. No, that's right. Ross Beatty, like Lucas Lundin, rest in peace, was an expert at hiring and motivating experts. That in itself is a skill set, but it's an extremely, extremely, extremely rare skill set. Lucas Lundin's skill set was probably hiring Wojtek, which, let's just say it worked out for me very well. So I would urge you in the early stages of these things to look at people. I'm going to change a little bit now and talk about today's market. Some of you know that I was fairly noisy about it. A week ago, I sold my physical silver, or 80% of my physical silver. I knew I did the right thing, despite the fact that the silver price has gone up. I knew I did the right thing when the internet response to that was so hostile, so hostile. I remember buying the silver 4 years ago, fairly public, and people say, why would you buy silver? Why don't you buy Bitcoin? Whatever, just whenever I encounter massive hostility, I know I'm doing exactly the right thing. And selling the silver, I was a little nervous about, and of course the price has gone up since, but I knew I did the right thing with the outpouring of hate that I experienced. Now, I sold it because it inhabited a speculative part of my portfolio. I bought it because it was hated, and I figured when it ceased to be hated, it would go up in price. And when that happened, like a good speculator, I'd sell it as opposed to writing it back down. I also did it because I noted that the silver producers around the world at present were discounting sort of $45 silver. And if over the next 12 months the silver price holds flat, as a speculator, had I held the silver, I would have had a flat result. But if the price of silver holds flat, the producers, who are being valued by Bay Street and Wall Street at $45 silver, are going to give me a 50 or 60% bump. As a speculator, would I prefer 12 months of flat, or would I prefer 50 or 60% up? Obviously, the answer to that is the latter. And one of the things that I think is going to surprise people, one more pleasant surprise at least, in 2026 is that many generalists, in fact, many people in our own industry, don't understand the net present value or net asset value leverage that's still in this market. I look at the earnings estimates off Bay Street and on Wall Street, and the earnings estimates are based on $3,200 gold or $3,300 gold. The pawnbroker in me, the old loan shark in me, says, okay, the expectation is that you'll sell this stuff for $3,300. That's what the estimate's based on. And you sell it for $45. There's a bit of a delta. How can you not have an earnings surprise? If your assumption is predicated on 33 and you get 45, it shouldn't be a surprise, but I guess it's going to be. How has Newmont had 3 straight quarters of earnings surprises? It isn't like their operations have turned around a whole bit. It's that all of the people who estimate them are estimating them on a $400 or $500. A gold price is $400 or $500 more than the estimates. And I suspect we have one more quarter of that stupidity, unless, of course, metals prices fall. But the second leverage is much more dramatic. People like myself who do risk-adjusted net present value calculations, including pipeline calculations, if you're doing that predicated on a lower gold price and you start doing discounts at 4,500 as opposed to discounts at 3,200, there's an enormous difference. That difference, that 32 to 45, the increase in the gold price, masks margin appreciation that could be 3 or 4 times that. If these metal prices hold, never mind go up, there's an awful lot of room in this stuff. There's an awful lot of room. I don't think I need to tell this room that if you go over to the conference hall, no knock on the conference, it's a wonderful conference. If you walk around the conference room, 2 things are immediately apparent. All those guys have 10 million ounce discoveries, so the gold prices go into $1,000 right away because these guys are all going to be successful. Or more seriously, most of the companies won't work at any gold price because they don't have any gold. They're looking for gold. And if the price of something you don't have goes up, it shouldn't really have any impact on the net present value. But for those who do, if this gold price holds, the market response will be, I think, truly stupid. And that brings me maybe to the last thing I want to talk about, which is probably particularly germane for these ladies' efforts. I think that we're coming into the goofiest M&A cycle of my life. And I've mercifully been part of some really goofy M&A cycles. Four or 5 times, probably 10 times in my life, I've witnessed a merger where I thought that the buyer was really smart because he or she could see a whole bunch of value that I couldn't see. Turns out usually I was right. They overpaid. And I think there's room, a lot of room to the upside for intelligent transactions. But I think once the transactions get underway, that the transactions will be less intelligent. And for those of you who are shareholders of the seller, this is your kindest possible wish. I think it's coming true in earnest. Now, I don't think that the M&A thing is a mistake. I think it's a wonderful circumstance. A well-constructed merger, take 2 companies, put them together, and you reduce G&A as a function of net asset value. If the industry has any real sin, it's G&A, and reducing that G&A is a wonderful way to increase value for shareholders. But it does something else. It allows the management team to do capital allocation decisions across more assets. If you have one asset in your company, you have to try to advance that asset. Otherwise, you don't get paid a salary. And the ability to do asset allocation across more assets should, in the right circumstance, lead to better allocation of capital. In today's market, bigger companies enjoy greater liquidity. They enjoy index inclusion, free buying, free distribution, higher share prices, lower cost of capital. Capital-intensive business, a very, very, very good thing. The major companies, at least all the ones I talked to, I was talking about Agnico Eagle earlier this morning, where Amar Al-Jindi said, we will pay a very good price for somebody who's de-risked a property, somebody who's taken 10 years out of the development timeline, somebody who's done the impact benefit agreement, somebody who's done the environmental work, somebody who's done a real bankable feasibility study. We understand all the value that those management teams paid or contributed, and we're willing to pay for them so that we don't have to do them. We're going to have a spectacular M&A market. The industry, as those of you who are in it know, has underinvested in exploration, underinvested in development, underinvested in construction, underinvested in sustaining capital, and done it for 30 years. Long, long, long time. And we aren't going to be able to overcome those challenges in 5 years or 6 years. And what that means is that the few successful efforts that we generate are going to attract eye-popping multiples. The bottom line in all this is there's a great bull market coming. Don't waste this one. Don't go through that exhibit hall and buy the lame, the halt, and the blind. Do the work, back the good people, work the real discoveries, and understand that the real discoveries are going to sell ultimately in this market for more than you can possibly fathom. You are in that next bull market that they talked about in that bumper sticker in Midland. It's incumbent on you not to waste it. Ladies and gentlemen, hosts and hostesses, thank you very much.
You're not getting off that easy. Okay. Yeah, let's sit down. You sit there. I'll sit over here. Let a couple old men sit. You thought that you were going to get to the airport or something. Ain't going to happen. Okay, question. You said you cash and checks.
Yes, sir.
Here's a question I have. You're cashing checks, but just sitting on cash isn't your style.
No.
So what does that mean? Where are you
Well,
going
actually,
with
I am sitting on some cash. You know, Quinton, I do have way too much liquidity right now. But there's been times in my life, Quinton, when I had too much liquidity, and there's been other times when I didn't have enough. And I found myself happier when I had too much than not enough.
Okay. That's a good way to put it. Okay, all right. It's interesting. So, you look at other things right now, like tech seems to be coming off, and there's a few things that have been kind of in the basement for a while. I know the theme today is seize the day, but looking out there, what do you think is undervalued right now?
Well, there's not much hate in this market, Quinton. The broadest sector in resources that is experiencing hate is conventional energy. And most of my new allocations are going into conventional energy. You may not have noticed, Quinton, but I also, in the process of failing retirement, started a bank. It's not something that I would recommend for those people who would like to become unemployed, by the way. It's a ferocious amount of work, but it's also a lot of fun. Lending is really where I'm from.
Okay.
And one sector that's broadly hated, aside from my own bank, are community banks in the United States.
Yeah, true.
And so I've been a fairly aggressive buyer of well-run $2 to $3 billion regional community banks in the U.S. that are not run by Wall Street hotshots, but actually run by loan sharks, good folks like me.
Okay, that's interesting. But you also mentioned conventional energy, so you're talking oil and gas.
Conventional energy. And the part of the resource sector the part of this sector, the mining sector that's gotten no love, is early stage exploration, grassroots exploration.
Yep.
And so I've been doing that. As you know, Quinton, I've been fond of the prospect generator methodology for a very long time. And the prospect generators, I mean, they've caught a bid, but they haven't caught a big bid. Yeah. And I note that the whole industry got caught with their pants down in terms of exploration pipelines. Yeah. And the generators that have big inventories of good ideas are going to be able to move them all.
It's interesting when you see a company like Newmont basically get rid of most of their exploration staff. You got to say, well, where are they going to turn? And I think we're looking at a number of juniors in this show or this show that starts the day.
I don't think Don Lindsay's in this room. I hope he's not.
Okay.
But he came up to me at dinner a few years ago, and he laughed. He sat down and he says, "Rick, you got me right where you want me. My board has told me to tune up exploration. Parenthetically, I called downstairs. They reminded me I laid them all off.
Ouch.
And I get a call every week from a major saying, what do you see? Who should we be talking to? What do we do? But among the juniors too, these little juniors can, they can go out and they can raise $5 or $6 million. And put cynically, they can't draw any management fees if there's nothing to manage. They have to take projects, and projects are less easy to come by. They have to go to the prospect generator. It's as though you owned a grocery store and you had a whole shelf full of bread, and most other grocery stores didn't have any. It's a nice place to be. So I've been doing that. And the other thing is that successful efforts aren't being rewarded as immediately and extravagantly as they ought to be. I've seen circumstances where a stock was selling for $1. They drilled a great drill hole, validated the thesis, and they go to $1.40. Now that stock at $1.40 is way cheaper than it was at $1, because you got some data.
Yeah.
And so in those rare circumstances where I'm able to pay attention and I see a discovery that validates a thesis, provided I was there early enough, or people that I knew were there early enough that I understood the thesis, I'm very greedy in circumstances like that, Quinton.
Okay.
I buy as much as I possibly can.
I think I understand what you're saying. I think there's a lot of companies that suffered from issuing too much paper a few years ago. There's a lot of fatigued shareholders, and you're not seeing the big lifts yet because there's a lot of people that just hit the sell button.
And I think that's wonderful. I hope in the case of those rare discussions that they hit the sell button very aggressively, and they sell it to me.
There you go. All right. So now you got to beat Rick to the buy button. All right. Well, thank you very much, Rick.
Thank you, Quinton. Congratulations on a wonderful decade.
Thanks. Jasmine, I'm going to wing-ding it here. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this organized. But before we have all our CEOs come up, and we'll have a little bit of a comfortable, discussion here. Wanted to just say, look, there are some pretty fundamental changes coming in the mining world. We're seeing a shift in jurisdictions where people are focusing a lot of exploration these days, which in the past weren't necessarily a focus. I think 3-4 years ago, when was it, Snowline made the discovery in Yukon. Look, there was a lot of activity 15 years ago in the Yukon, but it went quiet. It went dormant for a long time. That's now been rekindled, largely part to Snowline's discovery, but there were a lot of discoveries that were already there. Bayan had a very sizable gold deposit in the works. White Gold, of course, had a pretty sizable resource, and I think it's even grown considerably here recently. I think the Yukon is looking to be probably one of, if not the most important jurisdictions coming up in this gold cycle. And the way I've put it in the past is that, looking back in history at big booms, so in this case, I guess the best analogy would be looking at gold going up to $800 an ounce back in January of 1980. The focus in that case centered largely around northern Nevada, the Carlin-style deposits, and it just led to one discovery after another. You look, many of the great gold companies that we have today have their roots, at least partly or wholly, in northern Nevada, and that boom that we saw. Where's going to be that next jurisdiction where you're going to see discoveries made that really do catalyze the next generation of gold miners? I think the Yukon's one, but look, we're going to have one CEO from South America here, and I think, northeast corner, the Archean corner of South America, Archean, Paleoproterozoic terrain of South America is going to be another ground zero. There's a lot of activity there. There's a lot of potential for discoveries. But you also have here in Canada several locations. I think BC is certainly going to be one. So, that's something to look forward to. I know there's politics, and I'm American, so I can get away with saying just about anything I want, but you gotta sort some stuff out up here, okay? But the other one, look at Timmins. Who would think that the Timmins camp would come back to life? Well, when a major mining company that doesn't have a lot of vision, better watch what I'm saying, is in a camp, there's not a lot of growth. There's not a lot of inspiration. But when you get, fresh blood, not that Tony McCooch didn't grow up in Timmins, okay, but you look and you think, okay, we're starting to see a dynamic shift in the Timmins camp, and now we're seeing discoveries like Onyx Gold and things like this. I mean, it's just a remarkable. So there's these new loci, of discovery that are coming, and it's really a delight today to have 3 CEOs who are going to join up here in the States. So come on up, guys, and then when we sit down, I'll introduce folks, and we can talk more about each story. Thanks. I think these are on. Yes, I think they're all on. So, look, it's going to be casual today, and it's really a nice venue to do this. I mean, like just the organization is. So, Jasmine, way to go. Right on. Look, I've known Tara for eons. I think Bob Moriarty introduced me to Tara like 15 years ago or more. Maybe
it was more than that.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, never mind. We won't talk about that. Anyway. I know a little bit about your background with mining gold in the Yukon, family endeavor, but I'm gonna. So you have a few minutes. Now Jasmine told me there's a guy outside named Bubba who's going to keep us under control here. We get 3 minutes. If we don't keep it at 3 minutes, she sends Bubba in, and Bubba straightens us out here. So I got to keep everything on track. But why don't you take a few minutes here? And I think there's some slides ready too.
There are, yeah.
Okay, all right. So tell us about Bayan.
Okay, well, I think it's a pretty exciting bull market. Waking up this morning, seeing gold and silver prices, I think we are going to see some pretty interesting moves. To your comments, Rick, this market is just starting to heat up. Don't know where the video went, but we're starting this year with an incredibly strong treasury, almost just under $38 million in the bank. Got some great price targets from our new analysts, which I encourage everybody to take a look and read their research. As you said, Yukon's pretty hot. This belt with Snowline's discovery, our discovery, and now a very large resource. These 8 million ounce resources that you see between us and Snowline are rare. We have 720 square kilometers, of which we explored 2%. We have a silver mine beside us and a gold mine down the road that's for sale. Lots of interest and activity in this area. Our deposit remains open. In fact, our drilling from this last year shows that the whole southern boundary on the southwest part of power lines open, airstrips open, and that's just our deposit within the first 200 meters. We've drilled one deep hole down 650 meters. We are changing the paradigm by showing these high-grade starter pits. People thought of Banyan as low grade, but there you're seeing plus 2 grams and plus 1 to 2 grams in these zones that go east-west across our property. So, talking about our high-grade hits, like this 16 meters of 9 grams, 40 meters of 4 grams at airstrip, we're defining these high-grade zones and changing the thought of what Banyan is. And the same at Powerline, on our Powerline deposit, 2 and 3 and 16 gram intercepts. And then we have our silver, which was an interesting. So as if this gold deposit wasn't big enough, we now have this zone that's 2 kilometers by 3 kilometers where we've identified 3 zones, 6 veins. over 18 intersections into it with very high-grade core in the 1AG1 zone where, we had 13,000 grams per ton over 2.2 meters within a broader 100-meter zone of 300 grams. And then 20 meters away, stepped out and hit a 10,000 gram per ton hole that over 1.7 meters, but within 5,600 grams over 3.4 meters. So, very high-grade core in these Keno Hill veins, typically, as Phil knows, 4 to 6 meters wide is kind of what you're looking at. And, at this silver price, what's 1 meter cubed of Keno Hill silver worth at 10,000 grams per ton? That's about $160,000. So, is that intercept we hit that's 1.5 kilometers away in the zone 1, is it the same vein or family of veins? I'm pretty excited about the dimension that brings to Banyan. So, come by our core shack at Roundup. My team is here. We've got Duncan and Hannah and Keegan to talk to you about the details of it. What I want to tell you is we're still pretty cheap, $62 per ounce Canadian. Compared to our neighbors in this district, is a pretty, we got a ways to go to re-rate, and that I think doesn't even factor in our silver at all. And these large deposits are rare. Yeah, we're going to get some new discoveries in this sector, but we already have a very large deposit. So yeah, that's my spiel, Quinton. I think it's going to be fun.
Awesome. Look, I'm very interested in. Yeah.
Was I 3 minutes?
I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm sure the audience will too. We're going to save questions from the audience till a little bit later. But when Banyan was modeling things a couple of years ago, it was without a lot of domaining constraint. But you brought in geologists here recently that really opened my eyes back in July, I think. You brought in a team that kind of really put a fine-tooth comb to things, to look at things. Can you describe how the geologist's approach to the deposit has changed here recently and what effect that has had on the deposit?
Well, I think it's had a pretty positive impact on it. Duncan Mackay, yes, I'm not going to go into all the domains because this audience, not all technical, Quinton, but it has changed both our ability to target these high-grade zones, and we can trace it. Those holes to the southwest were a technical success showing tracing these high-grade zones. So I think our new geological model has brought credibility. There are people that didn't like our geological model, came in and have invested since they've said, yeah, we actually think that your model now fits this deposit. And in mining, as we know, consistency and predictability are super important.
All right. I was very impressed. I got to say, there was a recognition that there are high-grade structures, components in the system. And, you're dealing with a reduced intrusion, a reduced intrusive style system, but it's largely hosted by sedimentary rocks. In fact, that intrusion is a bit elusive. Now, there's some dikes or, dike-like structures that are probably coming off of whatever mothership is driving this thing. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to, no wild goose chase necessary, but, it does leave a lot of thought. I look at your model, for example, and you think, okay, there's kind of this sheet-like body of gold that you've defined that's really arbitrarily defined by the limit of drilling you have to date, okay? It's mostly hosted in the sedimentary rocks, which are outside of the intrusion. We don't really know where the intrusion is, but in my brain, that says this thing's only beginning. You're basically dealing with, you're out in the oriole of the system. Yep. You're not in the guts of it. Where do you want to take exploration from here?
Well, we are going to do some pure greenfield step-out exploration. Our geophysics, our soils show that, this is a district. We've got that 720 square kilometers, so at least 10% of our budget is going to go to exploration. People say, how much is going to silver? And I say, well, we're drilling off gold at the same time as silver, so yes, we're going to have a focus on that, but that will also take some of our gold to both indicated and measured as we continue to chase those high-grade silver structures. So we don't necessarily need to separate out that budget, but yes, even the higher gold price is going to drive the pit lower. Like we were basing the depth on that rule of thumb. An open pit doesn't start deeper than 200 meters at $1,800 gold. I think we're going to see some paradigm shifts. That's why we talk about we're plus 1 gram, is because that used to be the rule of thumb for what you needed for an economic open pit. Find 1 gram at $5,000 gold. I think our paradigms are going to have to change. We know that pit's already going to go deeper and take in ounces. So yeah, we probably haven't drilled deep enough, even for where the new rule for an economic depth of a pit is going to be.
Okay, good news. Most major mining companies are going to immediately recognize that there's a lot of upside to the story. So I don't think you have a problem there. And look, I don't know if Craig Hart's in the audience or not, but Craig Hart, who's kind of the brains behind the whole reduced intrusive model, clearly shows that the silver component, the silver veins, can be a component of a type of system like this. So it is interesting that you're seeing that. It kind of confirms what Craig said. You have Keno Hill nearby, so it's not too surprising, I guess. But it's a good problem to have, finding silver.
It's a good problem to have. Well, and we've changed Craig's paradigm too. He used to think that the surface expression of a Riggs deposit was only 1 kilometer if you read his old papers. And here we are with 5 kilometers and no edges found yet. So this was a very large system that probably ran for a very long time. And just look at how much silver has been produced at Keno Hill and continues to be in reserve next door. It was a big system. And so have we found the roots of it? Probably not.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about another big system, and Claudia has been working on a focus on a very important copper gold district in British Columbia. So,
thank you, Quinton. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Pleasure to be here. I'll give you the very quick overview of Kodiak Copper and what we are about. We are a copper exploration company, copper critical mineral with a supply crunch coming, lots of demand from AI, from electrification, but very few discoveries, and a supply crunch on the horizon. Kodiak is copper and gold, so we also have quite a lot of gold on the side in addition to the copper. Management team. Strong management team with a track record of shareholder returns. The founder and chairman and technical lead of Kodiak is Chris Taylor, whom you probably all know from our sister company, Great Bear, massive discovery success and success for shareholders. We are in British Columbia. In fact, from here, just a 3 hours drive up the highway. Very stable, predictable, low-risk jurisdiction, great place to work in our experience. And where we are in particular is a fantastic region. We are in an established mining region in southern British Columbia between 2 big copper mines, Highland Valley and Copper Mountain. And that, of course, is a huge advantage, all the infrastructure there. And it keeps our exploration costs low and will, in the future, when it comes to permitting and building a mine, be even bigger an advantage. Our project, MPD, is a copper-gold porphyry. When we started out in 2019, our vision was that this is a project that has the potential to become a major mine in the future. So over the last years, we have very patiently, systematically consolidated the district from multiple small land packages and drilled a lot, in total 90,000 meters, so every year big drill programs. And just now in December, we reached a big important milestone. We came out with our maiden resource, which shows the size and the scale potential of the project. And it was well received by the market. We're very fortunate to have a good market just at the time of this important milestone. And one writer said about our maiden resource, it's a starting gun, not a finish line, and I couldn't put it better. It's very much a starting point for growth. Some companies slow down after they have their maiden resource. That will certainly not be Kodiak. There is lots of room to make the resource bigger, grow the deposits, plus we have 20 plus exploration targets on the property, so lots more potential also for discovery. Worth mentioning, our capital structure, we are very tightly held, even after 7 years of big exploration projects, less than 100 million shares outstanding. We're able to avoid dilution for our shareholders. We're cashed up and ready to go for this season. And last but not least, I would argue that it's a fantastic time to look at the junior sector and at Kodiak, because we are at the start of a bull market, and the big companies, the producers, the developers have really started rallying. And just now, the juniors are starting to rally as well. And that's very typical. The juniors typically come later, but that presents a lot of opportunity. And Kodiak's a good example of that. This is us, our market cap, compared to some companies that are more advanced, a year or two. They've really run already. And even though our share price is up from, I think at the start of last year, 40 cents to now over $1.20, there is still a lot of room to catch up. Very many other juniors are in the same position, and that means exciting times ahead, lots of room and lots of opportunity for growth and for shareholder returns. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Claudia, so I've reviewed your project and several times, and looked at the exploration you're doing and the focus, and you did shift gears, I think it was about 2 years ago, into looking at the higher grade component to put together the resource. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work you did there and then where you want to take things from here?
Yep. Well, when we started at MPD, our first aim was to really show scale, to show that this the mineralization extends much further than previously thought by many historic explorers on the property. So we first started our drilling to drill deep and showed that the mineralization reaches down to 1,000 meters, and really proved the case that there's a lot more than what previously thought. And then particularly in the last 2 years, as we were working towards a resource, we focused on near-surface, high-grade mineralization and adding more of that and proving more of that, because for a resource, and then as we move into development, that is important to find that type of mineralization that in the future has the potential to be starter pits.
Okay. So you say you're not sitting still, you're going to advance this fairly aggressively, and it is a big task. You got to work on all the aspects of permitting and developing a mine, but you also have this exploration component. Can you describe how you're going to distribute your efforts? Like how much is going towards exploration, how much is going towards the actual advancement of the project?
That's a very good question. It's something we're discussing very intensively, where to focus and where to focus our exploration budget. We will for sure this year spend a large part, the majority of our effort on resource expansion, because we have many obvious targets to make the deposits bigger. They are all open, and most of them in multiple directions. And we will put some of our effort also into exploring the, at current count, 20 plus exploration targets that present the opportunity for more discoveries, for potentially more zones than the 7 we have currently. And how exactly that split is, that's heated discussions between our geologists, and we'll announce in this quarter as we get ready for the drill start. Okay.
That's a fair answer. So it sounds like an exploration component is going to be pretty big as part of the story going forward. And that's the takeaway. Okay, that's awesome. When do you expect to make the announcement about your exploration plans?
Well, sometime in the first quarter. We
First quarter.
typically drill between sort of March, April, then all the way to
Okay.
December. That's the lowest
All right.
cost drill season. So at the moment, we're just working through all the models and making plans, and you'll hear from us soon.
Okay, so that sounds like an opportunity. There you go. See, you're the first to know that they've got big exploration plans coming. Okay, now, you look at this region, you said Copper Mountain, and that was when did Copper Mountain sell? I can't remember. Do you remember? It was like, how many years ago?
What, 2 years ago?
It was just two, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Gil Clausen, wasn't it? Or, yeah. That was a big success. How do you see this story unfolding? Because you could replicate that here. And I'm just bringing this up because that was a successful story that, created a lot of value. How do we do that?
Well, that's a very good analog and successful project mine next door. MPD is very similar geologically to Copper Mountain. It's on the same trend, very similar rocks, very similar geology. So having a mine next door that's an analog for us obviously is a big advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it garnered interest, was sold at a good price, that's also very good precedent to have. And yeah, all very encouraging aspects for us.
Okay, so you have a model that you can follow that's already demonstrated it produced a lot of value, but you also have two operators in the immediate area too, which I think is an important aspect because having a buyer is always a nice thing. But let's talk a little bit about BC. So you got First Nations. I'd like to know a little bit about how you're advancing things with First Nations, but then also how you see British Columbia and the current environment to advance projects. I don't mean to poke the bear, but it's a big topic, okay? To be frank, you have a great asset. And, what could the British Columbia, I'm American, disclaimer, okay? What could be done here in British Columbia to make mining projects, look, there's projects advancing. Look at Osisko, the development. They're getting on with Caribou and things like that. So it's not like it's closed for business. But there's a bit of a cloud there that's, I think, causing enough uncertainty that investors are looking at other jurisdictions before they look at British Columbia. What needs to happen to make that change and improve the situation here?
My experience is certainly that attitudes are changing and that there's a lot of interest in BC these days, more so than when we started in 5 or 8 years ago. What I would highlight is that mining is a very large component of the GDP in British Columbia, which tells you that mines are getting built and are operating. It's a very stable, predictable, mining-friendly region. The bad rap came from it being slow and bureaucratic. And that is certainly sometimes the case. Permitting takes long, but I think it's moving in the right direction. There's certainly a recognition by politicians, by regulators, that that needs to be addressed. All the politicians are saying the right words. Let's hope it translates into actions. But it's also simply, I think, the price to pay for being in a stable, predictable jurisdiction. If you're in a frontier jurisdiction, you have maybe quicker progress and quicker permitting, but you have big risks. And so you have to take the good with the bad. And yeah, I can say from our experience, our permitting sometimes is frustrating, and it takes us several months to get a drill permit, but you start a couple of months early and you get your permit and you move ahead and you can work with it. And we haven't had any issues and have been able to do all the work we wanted.
Yeah.
So, all good.
All right. And then just briefly, First Nations. What is the path for you there?
Well, the First Nations have to agree to every permit every year, and so putting the right relationship in place is very important, and work with the First Nations. We started building those relationships before we even drilled, before we even touched the ground, and haven't had any issues, have very productive working relationships, and have received all the permits we wanted, and yeah, are working in a very constructive way with the First Nations.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So lots of work, but lots of exciting news coming this year. It sounds like exploration. Really want to hear your exploration pitch when you get your program laid out. Sounds good. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, Elaine Ellingham is going to speak about a really exciting gold project in South America here. So,
Great, thanks.
Omai. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess it's great seeing everybody out, and I'm sure we're all first thing this morning. We had to check to see how much higher the gold price had gone this morning. I guess like a lot of people in our business, I've been in the business for a very long time. I'm like whoever said we're never retiring, and this is sort of my retirement project. But what I would say is, seize the day. And do I love seeing the gold price? I do. However, when you work in the mining business, you hope for the best and you prepare for the worst. And so for me, I am an exploration geologist, and so the dream of every young geologist is to, work on a past-producing mine in a place where you think they left a lot behind for one reason or another. And I mean, Omai is certainly one of those projects. So we're in Guyana, which is South America, not West Africa. And I'll talk a little bit about that, obviously, some forward-looking statements. Yeah, so we've been actually working on this for 4 years, and so when we started, the gold price isn't where it was, where it is now, but it had been in production. When it was in production, it produced almost 300,000 ounces a year. It was the largest primary gold producer in South America, but the key thing is it operated when the gold price was under $400 an ounce, touched down at $250 an ounce. I think they were still marginally profitable, but at the end of the day, a tough slog. And they had other corporate priorities, so this got shut down and the mill moved over to the Rosabelle mine. So what we've done over the last 4 years is, and in a pretty thin budget in the first years, I have to tell you. That's what I was saying. We went out for dinner last night and I said, geez, Jason, we don't have to share a meal this time. And we can move from the 1-star hotel in Guyana up to the 2-star, which is a really good thing. But yeah, so in that time, we were actually moving on to our 5th 43-101 resource estimate that's coming out in about a month. But we've basically identified 2 million ounces of indicated, 4 million ounces of inferred. Okay, so you are looking at an orogenic gold deposit, and I spent most of my life in Ontario, Quebec. It happens to be in Guyana, in the Guyana Shield. A little bit younger, but basically the same kind of deposit. So just incredible. There's 2 adjacent deposits. The one on the right is the Gilt Creek deposit, and the upper part was mined out. And then there's a sill, a dike under there, and then down below, we knew there was mineralization, and so there's about a 1.8 million ounce deposit there, averaging about 3.2, 3.3 grams. We know it goes to depth. It was drilled down to 960 meters. But really what we're looking at is between 300 and 600 meters, which isn't really that deep. Then just 450 meters away is the big prize, which is a shear-hosted gold deposit. And that's like some of the really nice deposits like in northern Ontario. This one is 2.5 kilometers long already. We've drilled it down to 450 meters, and there are multiple vertical zones. So if you look, I think there is a pointer, but if you look down at the bottom, you always have to do, when you're a small company, you can be nimble and you can do the crazy stuff. But that's our deep hole down there. And last year what we did, we drilled a 2-kilometer hole. We drilled across the one deposit and we kept going. And we actually hit at depth 700 meters below our deposit that goes down to 450 meters. We hit the shear zone. We hit 7 gold zones down there, okay? So those are my no guts, no glory holes. So, and I've done them before. So the Wenot deposit is quite amazing. And we'll just look at that a bit. But so just quickly, I mean, a lot of people think it's an old mine. You're just drilling under an old pit. It's going to be deep. But the thing is, the gold price was so low. They were very selective, and they really took one zone. So a lot of our sub-parallel zones actually come to surface. So 60% of our resource for Wenot is still above 350 meters. So it's hard to show it, but basically all the dots are the drilling we did last year. So we were drilling fairly shallow. Last year we started in late 2024, we started drilling deeper. We started hitting zones like 4.5 grams over 57 meters, 3.1 grams over 68 meters. Like even for me in Northern Ontario and Quebec, I hadn't intersected things like that. Like a lot of these orogenic deposits, it's better at depth. There's a long way to go, but obviously a huge deposit. And I guess between what was in production, produced previously in our resource, we're over 10 million ounces. So this is a big one. So Guyana, it is, the Fraser Institute has it in the top 10 best jurisdictions to do mining. The geology, I think, speaks for itself. It's good geology. But the government, it's a country with only 800,000 people. So when I'm in country, the president knows it. I often get summoned to meet with him. He only asks me one question: how soon can you be in production? So, you know, we have different kinds of situations. It's kind of, you know, the upside down world. And so managing expectations is a challenge. You can't just, we've explained to him, you can't just take a bunch of excavators and go out there and start going. But, you know, it is a good project. The local communities remember when the mine was in production. They remember the jobs. They sent their kids to great schools. It was a great time. And so they always ask us, how soon can you be in production? So we are trying to do, we've got metallurgy going with SGS. Even though we have a lot of drilling to do, like we can fast track some stuff. There's tailings, you can see at the bottom right, there's existing tailings. We just finished a 4-month project. So basically between that, we believe we have about 90 million tons tailings capacity. The airstrip, we have some old buildings. They aren't pretty, but they're really functional. It's actually a fairly easy project, and I guess one of the other things, there's a paved road. It comes almost within 10 kilometers now, and it's actually a road that goes down to Brazil, so we just happen to be a byproduct beneficiary. So we do see that, you know, there aren't too many projects around, and when we started, we were looking for what every company's looking for. Over 5 million ounces, we're there. We're looking for a long life mine. We're going into a resource estimate in the next 4 to 6 weeks, followed immediately by a PEA that will include both deposits. We're targeting 18 to 20 year mine life, 250, 300,000 ounces a year. So there are not very many projects around the world that are very developable, very supported. We've already applied for EIA, done our community consultation. We're just waiting for terms and scope. So in some ways, that's all way ahead of, we still have a lot of drilling to do with 5 drills on the property. So I think, you know, seize the day, yes, but, you know, in this business, you know, you still have to, you know, we're long-term projects, and so it's absolutely spectacular for us. Our stock was up 580% last year, 500% the year before, where stock was 4 cents, and I think we're trading at about 90 today. So, you know, we still think that this project is destined to be a producer.
All right. Well, look, Guyana and more broadly the Craton in northeast South America has been a subject of exploration and mining for quite some time. It's kind of been on again, off again. How do you see things right now, and where do you think things are headed? Because I look at the geologic potential, it's like extraordinary. You know, it's like, it reminds me of, you know, West Africa in, say, 2006, 7, 8, in that period where there was just one discovery after another. Where do we go from here? You guys have a great story. Do you think things are opening up? Is it going to be a kind of ground zero for the gold industry here soon, or?
Yeah, I think it's a new destination for sure. I mean, political risk is high on everyone's list. You know, Guyana seems to be very good. Suriname, you know, obviously Venezuela has some of the deposits in the same neck of the woods. That didn't go so well, but maybe it's on the mend. Yeah, I think Some of the challenges there, what people don't understand is like, although the deposits look like what we would see in Canada, it's covered with saprolite, which and sometimes alluvial sand. So it's difficult to find these things. There's a lot of artisanal miners, and even that, it kind of vectors you towards the deposits. But I think, yeah, it's a heyday. I mean, there's a real land grab going on in Guyana right now. There's going to be new discoveries. Founders was perhaps not a new discovery, but again, in this market, it's spectacular. Mm-hmm. I think it's a one-way street. I think it's opening up, just because also the governments recognize that big mines provide employment to the remote interior, and they're just, you know, there's jobs where otherwise there's nothing, and also the revenues they generate. I think it's going to open up big time.
That's good. You know, one thing that is happening in Guyana and more broadly off the coast here is discovery of oil, and yeah, so it reminds me of when oil was found off of the coast of Ghana, for example. Do you see any influence, impact from that, you know, politically? Is there going to be, you know, is that going to kind of overwhelm the mining scene? Anything like that coming?
Interesting you say that, because I've been going there almost 5 years now, and one of my first thoughts was the same as that, was offshore oil is so much easier than mining. Are they going to kind of look at the revenues coming in? Like, for example, the GDP per capita starting in 2027 for Guyanese is going to be the highest in the world, because there's a population of only 800,000 people. So quite a unique situation, but they remember, and the whole history of really the positive mining is when Omai was in production, because it was a huge percentage of their GDP. And so that's why people, even like out in the hinterland, when can I get a job? I get CVs all the time. What you do see is all the money coming in already. It's infrastructure. They've built hospitals. That's why our road's getting paved. They have a whole road and rail planned down to Brazil. A deep water port. They want to be the shortcut to the Panama Canal. New bridges. It's these people are moving like the wind.
Interesting. Okay.
We're the beneficiary, but the thing is, there are not jobs. It's offshore oil, so it's really spin-off jobs too. They're still bringing in the Americans to run out on the rigs. Mm. So I mean, mining is still right forefront.
Okay, interesting. So you've got a very large project, and you said you're working on a PEA. Target is, what'd you say, 250 to 300,000 ounces of production?
Well, it's in the works. I'd say 250, 300,000 ounces.
In that range, okay. All right. A lot of good geology on the project. Are you going to continue exploration? I know that you're doing some, you know, you're looking below the existing deposits. Do you have any exploration, you know, call it greenfield in a brownfield environment, you know, something of that ilk, or you're looking for new stuff on your property?
That's a good question. I mean, the thing is, when there wasn't a lot of money around, even though myself and the people I work with, we're mostly exploration geologists, so we're a sucker for a good hole out there, like where no man has gone before kind of thing. But you have to be practical when you have a tight budget, so we went for the low-hanging fruit because we had to. Now we have 5 drills on the property, so basically we are starting, despite the fact we're on the PEA, we're starting to think PFS. Okay. But we always, well, I call it going fishing. So like we took a hole and we went, oh, there's no holes out there, let's keep it running another 150 meters, and we hit 2.7 over 27 meters. Wow. Out where we don't know why it's there, and then at the other east end, which we were a little afraid because we think there's some structural complexity, and we drilled and we hit 11.2 grams over 14 meters. We don't know what those are about, but we have to keep advancing projects, because in this market, you want to get to production. You want to push these projects forward. Yep. And I mean, they're interesting. Everybody is looking for developable projects with a timeline to production, and so we can't deviate from that. But we do have one drill that's going to go fishing.
I like that. It reminds me. I was at Newmont in the mid 2000s, and you know, of course, I remember it was a time period where there were debate. They had picked up Normandy, and of course, Keem and Ahafo came with that acquisition. And I remember kind of this exercise in navel gazing, whether Newmont should keep Akim and Ahafo. I kid you not. I mean, in hindsight, like, what were they thinking? But there was a great deal of debate. Well, those turned out to be amazing deposits, and they had a very, very good future ahead of them. Now, I've looked at, because Nadine's on my board, and she put a bug in my ear about, I think it was a year ago or something. I did a little diving to see, I'm an exploration geologist, so I got to look at that aspect. And I'm telling you, like, your project looks a heck of a lot like Akim or Ahafo, where, 6 million ounces might be a start, but I think there's a little more there. So what do you think?
Well, a lot of people that show up there, especially people with a broad experience, they actually say it's similar to Sigma-Lamaque, which is in Quebec.
There.
And
Okay.
Sigma-Lamaque, shear-hosted deposit nearby, intrusion-hosted deposit. Lamaque, very, very similar, was in production for 50 years, from like 1937 to 1990. People who know that, I would love to go see that. Would love to get an invitation, but a lot of people that look at our deposit, they say it's a dead ringer, which makes you wonder, like, so we look at some of our mag anomalies and go, like, was that the triangle zone down there? So yeah, these certainly long life mines, yeah.
Yeah, and good grade too. I think that's an important aspect. You've got a very, very strong grade in your resource, and I think, geologically, in my view, you got something that's much, much bigger. That's my pitch for you. Okay, I think maybe get 2 rigs out there and start drilling the fishing holes. There's plenty of money out there now.
It's so funny because you've got quite a team of Guyanese geologists that have come forward, and they always look, and when I'm out there, they'll go, Miss Elaine, are we going fishing? Maybe.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Good. Keep them happy. Yeah. Whenever I have exploration geologists that complain they have too many rigs, I bring 2 more rigs, and then they stop complaining because they know I'll bring more rigs if they complain. So, yeah. Anyway, very, very good. That's all the questions I have. I think we need about, maybe 10 minutes. Jasmine said, okay, Q&A. Alma? 16. Oh, I see a clock. Yeah, sure. Okay. So let me stand up so I can see people raising their hands. Any questions for our 3 CEOs here?
I might as well start with one question. I did some work in Venezuela, and they're in the news right now a little bit. One thing that's come off the table for the discussions here was that Nicolas Maduro was talking about shifting the boundary between Venezuela and Guyana because it's a disputed frontier. I think that's totally off the table, and that you're much more secure than you were, say, 5 years ago when he was introducing that concept. Could you comment about the politics there?
Yeah, there's a lot of politics down there, but I think that realistically, and the way the Guyanese saw it, was that it was really, especially pre his election in Venezuela, to distract his people from the fact that the economy in the world in Venezuela was not strong. So I think it was a card he was playing to make him look like a stronger leader. It wasn't realistic, and it was always all about offshore oil. I remember somebody asked me, do you worry about Venezuelans coming onto the Omai project? I said, well, it's like 200 miles of the gnarliest jungle you ever saw in your life. So yeah, no, there was never any risk, and I think the Americans, a couple times they flew fighter jets over Guyana, pre-notifying us, but just as a sign. The Brazilian president was up there. I mean, Modi, the president of India, was there. And I think there was a British warship. So I mean, it was just posturing. No worries.
Okay. More questions. Let's see. We need to get the microphone around. Anybody else have a question here? Oh,
Don't be shy.
I could continue asking questions. Is that all right? Okay. So Banyan, when are we going to build a mine? What's the Yukon going to look like? There's a lot to this, I know, and I don't mean to be light, but the Yukon needs power, need some other things, but what is the critical path here to make a mine?
Well, our first step is going to be our PEA this year in the second half, and I think we've had a great drill season last year, and I think that'll set the stage for some economics. And similar to Elaine, we're going to put out a PEA, but we've got a view to our PFS. Also, the baseline work that we need to do in advance of permitting. I think that's yes, we need power. We've got a new government in the Yukon, and we've got Wade here. Our Minister of Environment. Certainly this new government is saying all the right things about focusing on, fixing some of these problems. Finding, we all know we need power in the Yukon, and actually North America wide, with all of the demands for electricity. Our governments need to get serious about getting, not just connecting grids, but getting power into the grids for them. So I know that's an active conversation, and one that we're talking with the other mining companies and the government about how do we solve that for the Yukon. So, it's one of our top issues. Yes, we have a power line that goes right across our property, and there's a hydro dam a little ways away, but we all know that we need more power in that grid. So starting at least with power, but it's going to be a very live conversation. How long? A kind of a general timeline from when you start permitting in the Yukon is you can start construction in 4 years. The ways to advance that are to do it right. Get your engineering, get your baseline, get your community and your First Nation on side. Those are key ways to shorten the timelines in any first world, whether it's BC or the Yukon, and it's something my team's very focused on. And I think the Yukon, we need some more operating mines in the Yukon. The Yukon needs the income, they need the jobs, and thankfully with the new Yukon government, they understand that. They've got business people who've been in the private sector and who understand that. And I think and they understand that time's money, and long regulatory processes don't necessarily make a better project. So I think that's going to be positive for the communities. And we've seen some positive development, like the Snowline MOU. The chief there said, Chief Hopes said very clearly in her press release and in her comments that they support responsible mining and they need the economic opportunities. So I think that's all very positive, and our team is very laser focused on what we need to do. And similar to my co-panelists, we're excited to get drilling again. We got 4 drills that'll be drilling in less than a month, so the team doesn't have very long to be sitting at conferences because we're going to be busy out on site.
Okay, and that's good to hear. I agree. The Yukon needs a win. Needs a win. I mean, it's been a challenge. You have lots of great geology, lots of great deposits, and but it's known to be a chilly place. It's a tough place to operate. Like your mention of electricity, I think right now there's enough electricity to keep people warm, but there's not a lot beyond that. That's a big need. When do you think it would be that power could be brought in? What's the solution there? What's the timeline? Do you have any sense?
So for our project, our PEA will be based on LNG diesel hybrid.
Is that right?
Because that is actually, from our trade-off studies, that's actually fairly economic for us. I think the opportunity would be, can that also feed back into the grid? Yukon Energy's already been talking about putting additional thermal in the Yukon. I think that's going to be a short-term solution that's needed. And then the governments really need to think about those longer-term projects. That's the only solution that can really come online in the time period. So, and thankfully we've got roads. We've got an existing highway to deliver that. There's an existing LNG in Whitehorse that's successfully operating, and the price out of Alaska is very competitive. So I think that makes our project can find a solution, and it's partly because we have such great infrastructure to start with.
Okay. Now, loaded question. Who's going to step into the Yukon in a big way?
You tell me, Quinton. I think we've seen that there's been interest in the Yukon, and you know the rumors, and many of us know who flew in business class in Air Canada, because you know, if you wear a logo on Air Canada in your business class, everybody in the Yukon knows pretty soon that you visited. But yeah, there's been lots of interest, you know, and I think you know that there's been lots of people going out, driving right past our property out to see the Eagle Mine. Some of them stop by for visits on their way by, so who knows? I think, as Rick Rule said, at some point the majors are going to have to go shopping. They don't have their own exploration underway. It is very rare to have these 8 million ounce deposits, and Yukon's got a few of them that are, you know, and I think we've got more to be discovered.
Okay.
You know, which
Well-
ones are going to move first? I think the ones with roads and power and cell phone service have a lot of advantages.
Definitely has it.
But I'm biased.
I can verify that you have self-service, because I remember when I went to the site, I called my broker and said, okay, I think I might want to buy a little bang in here. And yeah, I was able to do it from the corner building. Yeah, it's good.
And good call, because you didn't miss it.
Yeah, that was mid-July, I think. That was good. And I know there's folks from the Yukon in the audience here, and I don't want to put people on the spot or anything, but I would say that, in my view, the Yukon reminds me a lot of north central Nevada in terms of its geology and its geologic potential. I think the Yukon has, you know, a very high prospectivity. It's already manifest in the fact that you have multiple world-class discoveries across the territory at this point, and it will be ground zero. As soon as things get sorted out, as soon as you see somebody come in and buy Eagle, as soon as you start to see you guys advance your project to production, things like this, it's just going to cascade. It's going to cascade. Of course, there's Snowline out there too. And I think the Yukon, if there was any place in Canada that one should be envious of, it is the Yukon. You guys have it made. All right, Claudia. I don't mean to harp on exploration, but I've looked at your project enough to know that there are some places where there's some interesting high-grade components in, you know, like exploration targets, we'll call them. And I know that you focus a lot on the nearer surface, higher grade targets to kind of, you know, build up the case for building an economic project. And I think that's fantastic. But can you tell folks a little bit more about, you mentioned 20 targets a minute ago. Tell people a little bit more about some of those targets. I think those are quite interesting.
Yeah, happy to do so. We have a property that we have consolidated from many smaller packages, and which had lots and lots of previous work done on them, all by previous operators. None of them had enough to really make it work to have the size. So we put it all together, and we of course benefit from all the previous exploration, and have, since we all put it all in the same time, also explored ourselves, done a lot of regional work. And so now we have, in addition to the 7 deposits on which we focused first, which are now part of the resource, we have around about 20 additional targets. Some of them have been drilled already by historic operators, just a hole or two into them. Some of them just have good sampling or geophysical results. And some of them are new from our work, where we also use Verify AI, and in addition to the conventional of prospecting and exploration. And yeah, so we have 20 and growing exploration targets, and I think there's a good chance that when we look back in 30 years, 20 years at this project, and when it is a mine, that there will be more than 7 deposits and mineralized zones, that there are still more to be found out there. And that's, of course, very exciting. And I just had a meeting with a major just recently who said, oh, we have to drill all of those before you even come up with a resource. And I don't think that's what our shareholders want us to do, to just really focus on exploration. But it's exciting for us to still have this exploration angle and exploration sizzle to it, because many companies, once they have a resource, they sort of slow down with exploration and and really focus on the resource. And for us, certainly we'll have both, and we're certainly very excited to test some of those targets.
Yes, and I think there's some, I can't predict what you might discover, but I've looked at it enough to know that there's some, kind of telltale signs. It's more like a Kodiak type system or something like that. It does look like a very large scale system. And while the near surface that you've developed or are developing is fantastic, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a prize down there somewhere, a large scale prize, copper gold, just based on what I've seen. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be exploring. Okay, well, let's have a round of applause for everyone here. Looks like we're about at the hour. Is there any last words, any questions anybody has? Okay, lovely. Look, it's been a pleasurable morning. Good luck at the show. Seize the day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.